So
hello and welcome for those who are joining early. We'll be kicking off in just about 1 minute. We'll give everybody a chance to install Zoom and get settled, get a nice cup of tea ready. Well, according to to my clock, it is just gone 10 o'clock. So what a great opportunity to start and get going with today's session. And thank you so much for joining us on this session we've rather snazzingly entitled, Helping You Navigate to Microsoft Certification. We think the timing is absolutely right for this because certification is going off like topsy, Microsoft certification in particular. From a position really of not really doing anything for a number of years. When I joined DDLS the better part of 11 years ago, certification was a thing, but we really had to force people to get excited about certification and take the exams. We probably did less than 100 per annum back in those days. Well, I can tell you we blew that number out of the water last year with nearly 1,000 people who wanted certification and who got certification, which is utterly phenomenal. And I think the reasons for that are many and varied. And we'll make some effort today to actually go through why that might be and how you can get onto the certification sort of conveyor belt, if you like. The big thing for me, I think I'm hearing more than anything else, is if you're talking to Microsoft, and as you'll learn shortly, we have somebody from Microsoft on the call today. If you're talking to Microsoft, going to their online conferences, going to their virtual conferences, going to their in-person conferences, they are now talking about certification. It is front and center. And that also basically means that hiring managers and project managers are also thinking about Microsoft certification. We have, however, got about 25 years of history. We were just chatting prior to this call about NT351 certifications and all the weird stuff that used to exist in the past. Well, we've reinvented certification, and in today's session, we really want to actually sort of help you navigate through that. And we thought we'd start with a quote. So if we move on to the next slide. The great Yogi Berra, not to be confused with the guy who hung out with Boo Boo, the baseball player, he came up with a statement, you kind of got to be careful, you know where you're going, so you might not get there. And why we thought this was relevant is, going back in time, maybe 2 years, if you started on the certification journey, there was an opportunity, a very real opportunity, to discover you'd kind of headed up a cul-de-sac and you weren't actually heading in the right direction, or it wasn't going to deliver what you actually needed it to deliver. And that's the last thing you want to do and discover, is you've invested a lot of time in learning, a lot of effort, and you get to the point where it's time to do the cert and it wasn't what you expected it to be. There has been a complete revamp of Microsoft certifications over the last, it's probably been a 2-year journey. They're now stable, they're now robust, they're now well understood in the marketplace. But the biggie, the real biggie for me, is they are now role-based. And if that doesn't immediately make sense, if we go back in time, they used to be very product-based. So you'd have this tick in a box for that product or another tick in a box for another product. And you ended up with this kind of splattering of certifications across a bunch of different products. Well, now, if you're an Azure administrator or a data scientist, there are certifications that absolutely align to your role. So how are we going to take you on this journey? Well, if we move to the next slide, allow me to introduce you to the team. The first bloke with the 1985 Microsoft t-shirt on, well, a good-looking chappy is me. I head up our vendor partnerships here at DDLS, and that includes a relationship with Microsoft that probably goes back 30 years. I think I did my first certification in 1994 when I was about 13. In fact, I should probably say Gary Duffield, CNE, MCNE, CNI, MCT, MCSE, MCP, A+, and a whole heap of other certifications that I've amassed throughout the years. Today, I'm pleased to say there are less letters that we have to go chasing. Also on the call today is Hanna. Mary is DDLS's product manager for Microsoft, who is at the 6-month mark in her journey with DDLS today. And congratulations, Mary, you passed probation. You can stay and finish the call, which is fabulous. I think this is Mary's first webinar that she's done for us, and I know that we've worked hard on this, and she's looking forward to talking to you about really the model. I get the good stuff. Mary's got the nuts and bolts of this. We were also excited when the legend that is Orin Thomas reached out. I've known Orin for many years actually, and said, "Hey, I've seen you guys are doing this webinar. If you need any help," and yes, you're in. Please come along. So Orin will be delivering a lot of value there. He has been certified for a very long time, and he very literally wrote the book on certification. He's author of many books, many courses that we deliver. So let's begin. So what's in it for you and what's in it for your organization? So if you can actually capture the answer to this, if you can actually work out what it is that drives you towards certification, you're probably going to discover it's really unique for you. And I'll tell a quick story. I was chatting to a lady. She's called Jo, in actual fact, and she's a bit of an evangelist. She probably overposts on LinkedIn. And one day she said to me, she said, "Gary, what makes you think I'm an expert in Azure?" And I said, "Well, probably because you keep telling me you're an expert in Azure. All I've seen is, I know Azure, I know Azure, I know Azure. There'd never been any evidence, but she'd never actually done a certification." And I challenged her on that. And I said, "Well, what? Okay, you're an expert, but why have you never actually done the certification?" "Well, I don't sort of see the point of it." And that was strange to me, because if you're going to have all that learning and all that knowledge, why don't you validate that? Why don't you get the tick in the box and go and do the certification? So for her perspective, there just wasn't that value proposition there. Well, there's a lot of data out there. I mean, I would urge you to look at the Pearson VUE report, which is where these stats come from. There is also a great piece of research that Global Knowledge did in their salary survey around some of the reasons why people choose to get certified. And there's data that goes back a very long time. For the candidate, for the learner, 91% say they've got increased confidence. Well, I can tell you now, there is nothing better than the feeling where you're doing an exam, you click the button and it says, "Oh, thinking about it, congratulations, you've passed." There's a validation that all the knowledge that you've got, you're on the right track. You don't know everything, but from where the vendor's sat, you know what that vendor thinks that you need to know in order to be competent with that particular product. It's a pretty awesome feeling. And of course, although this is a strange thing for somebody who works for a training company to say, you don't necessarily have to do the training in order to get the certification. As an individual, if you are that Jo and you know everything, maybe she's a little bit scared. Maybe she was scared to challenge herself and to do the certification, but it is a great feeling when you do pass. You get greater job satisfaction. Some report an increase in earnings. And I think for a candidate point of view, and it's not implicitly stated on here, it also just opens up those opportunities, because project managers are now saying, "Hey, you know what? If you want to be involved in this project, then I need some evidence that you've actually got the skills." And I think, and this may be a bit of a blind side, my own personal view is that one of the biggest drivers for the increase we've seen in certification is COVID, because we don't necessarily now have IT technicians inside the business, behind the grey glass, working on the technology. They're doing some of this from home. And, in the same way, would you let a plumber or an electrician work on your home unless they've got the ticket, unless they've got the validation? I suspect most of us probably wouldn't, said Gary, who installed a light at home last weekend without any support from anybody else. But if you're going to let people play with your investments, your significant investments in cloud technology, you really want some evidence that they've got the skills, and the certification actually provides that. And from an organizational point of view, exactly what I just said, you need that validation. They need to understand that the people who are using their technology, who are managing their technology, have got the skills and capability to actually do that. I'm actually based in WA. I'm down in Margaret River on leave, as it happens today. Further up north, in a place called Wangara, I have a friend called Brett, and he owns a business, and he has IT staff who work for him. So he basically employs an IT team. There's probably only about 3 of them. And we've chatted, we play bowls, we've chatted over a few beers, and he doesn't want to get his team certified. He doesn't believe in getting them certified. And so we had a heated debate about it. He has a big boat, one of the engines is broken, and he's taking it to Johnson, whoever, to get it repaired. So why, said I, are you not taking it to just kind of Joe's mechanic down the road? Well, I want to get the licensed Johnson mechanic in order to sort it out. It's a $22,000 engine. It's like, so hang on, so your own business, you trust your IT, to people where you have no validation that the vendor, Microsoft in his case, has actually said, you know, these guys have a level of confidence in that technology. But when it comes to your precious boat, then you're going to take it to somebody who's got the license. That kind of contradicts itself a little bit. Maybe I convinced him to get certified, who knows? But again, go do the research, and there is a lot of evidence that people who are certified solve problems quicker, they're happier in their work, they're more content. And there's an old adage, you know, if you train people, they will leave. Well, what if you don't train them and they stay? You know, getting people trained and certified is absolutely key. So I don't know whether any of these stats or any of these numbers or my two little anecdotes would help you kind of decide that you should go to your boss and ask to be certified, or whether you're a boss and you should go and get your staff certified. The bottom line is there's a level of confidence that you get when you both have the certification and when you employ certified people. And if you're on this call right now and you're working for an IT company, a Microsoft partner perhaps, well, you need certified people right now in order to get your competencies. But if it's anything like the work that we do, when we're tendering for business, how many certified people have you got in AI? This number. How many certified people have you got in Dynamics? That number. It's also becoming almost desired and wanted by the market. But if we move on, let's just kind of have a quick history lesson. I was very proud of this slide. Marketing tried to take it out 3 times, but I put it back in, mainly because it took me the best part of 2 hours to actually create the thing one Sunday evening. For me, this is a history of kind of certification to this point. Now, the whole thing for me, from a commercial point of view, started off with Novell CNE, and you can just see the logo just tucked away on the left-hand side of this slide. I am CNE number 441 on the planet. It was a great certification. It was a great product. Wasn't a great application server. Microsoft had its NT product in market, realized that Novell was doing incredibly well in the networking space, and really upped its game. And at that point, Microsoft introduced something called the Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer. It was the de facto certification. Its name lived on long after it was retired. People were still recruiting MCSEs, and it had been defunct for 5 years. That was a great certification because it was simple. You did some workstation-y stuff, you did some server-y stuff, you did some networking-y stuff, you got certified, and all was fantastic. But we all know IT is no longer that server sat in the corner. As time progressed, the internet arrived and security became increasingly important. An Exchange server became the dominant mail platform. And suddenly the MCSE morphed into this very complicated, unwieldy beast that nobody truly understood. You could be an MCSE plus I, an MCSE plus I plus S. And how you'd navigate that and how you'd get to achieve those certifications, you pretty much needed an A to Z of certification in order to do that. So as time went on, Microsoft decided to abandon the Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer and came up with the Microsoft Certified Technology Specialist and a companion certification. It wasn't well understood in the market. It didn't really take off in the way Microsoft thought it would do. So they brought back the solutions expert now, as opposed to systems engineer. They brought back the MCSE, but it still had the same challenges. It was still unwieldy and still a little bit complicated. And, you know, because we're all techies, or a lot of us are techies, and we love the t-shirts, there's the obligatory Star Wars reference. Train you did, certify you must. If you're going to put all this effort into learning, why would you not do the exam? Would you really go to university? And on the very last day, he said, yeah, you know what? Yeah, I'm not going to bother doing the exam. So with all of that in mind, Microsoft took a step back and went, what's happening in the market right now? What do organizations actually want? What is technology actually doing? And the cold, hard reality was that people no longer needed to get the certification in server product X or server product Y. They needed role-based certification. That has made life a lot easier. So I'm delighted to say, and I'm delighted to introduce the very wonderful Mary Hanna, who will walk you through the new role-based model.
Thank you, Gary. That was an amazing introduction to everything that we need to know. And today, as we talk about the role-based model, I think it's important to talk about what's involved in the role-based model and where do you start? Where do you begin with all the different types of technology and all the different types of levels of certifications? How has Microsoft designed or redesigned their certification? And there's a few things that I'd like to sort of break down before we go into further So the one thing is a qualification type. There's currently a few different types of qualifications when you do a course. You can just complete a course and there will be no exam, but it's a course, you've completed it. And so you can actually get recognition for completing the course. There's a course that is associated with an exam, and that exam then gives you an exam certificate saying that you have completed an exam and you are recognized for actually sitting and passing the exam and validating your knowledge. There's also the certificate, which is can be accompanied to one exam or multiple exams, or like an exam, 2 exams to complete and actually earn one certificate. So that's sort of a qualification type on a course that you might do with Microsoft. There's also a certificate types. So you've got the fundamentals. The fundamental certificates, they validate a broad spectrum of knowledge, and it's there to give you just a grounded understanding of what's available across a specific stream of products, such as Azure or M365, Dynamics or Power Platform, or even just a security platform across Microsoft products. So that's where most people would start. But if you're already working with the technology and you have a role, there's the role-based certificates, which sit at either an associate level or an expert level. And the role-based certificates that's where Microsoft has designed their training to serve a solution focused, so that your administrator know that this is the right course for them, and this is the right certification path for them that they will eventually reach and earn a certificate for, which then can become an expert level certificate. So what roles are we talking about? Well, you've got your typical developer, administrator, DevOps engineers, and all sorts of business analysts, data analysts, artificial intelligence, and there's just so many different roles out there. So you need to be able to navigate the roles within across the technologies that are available. And finally, obviously, you've got the products, and that's your product streams within Microsoft technology. So going back on that, where do you start? How do you navigate the certification pathways? And we will give you examples. The next set of slides will give you examples of the visual of actually navigating through the certification pathway. But the first thing you might want to think about is where do you want to start? Do you want to start at the fundamental level? Do you just want to, are you a beginner trying to look at where you could possibly fit in the technology streams across Microsoft, or do you already know that you want to be administrator or a developer? The next thing you would then decide is if you are a business analyst, for example, and you want to go into the Dynamics space, then which type of business, or where do you want to specialize? You want to be a sales expert, or you know, or a marketing or a customer service expert in a Dynamics suite of products. Again, if it's M365 or Azure, you've got the same sort of role, like you can move in that product stream. Based on that, you will decide whether you want to, and on your experience, you will then look at the certificate type and whether you want to go to the associate or the expert. The one other certificate type is your specialty, and these are where you want to validate a third-party technology that is associated with or together on top of Microsoft products. So with that, and to give you more of a visual of what I've just tried to describe, I'm going to move on and hand you over to Orin, who will take you through an Azure example, and then I'll take you through a Microsoft 365 example.
Okay, Gary, can you just put up your thumb if you can hear me? Cool. Okay, so just to reiterate how important certification is, 20-something years ago, I was just doing the help desk at Faculty of Arts, University of Melbourne. Started getting certified, continued to get certified, and now I write the book on Windows Server for Microsoft. I work directly with the people that run the Windows Server product team. I work with the people who run Azure And I had a one-on-one yesterday as part of one of my monthly one-on-ones with Jeffrey Snover, who invented PowerShell. So to say that certification can take you from something that's very normal to something that's quite extraordinary. And in 2019, I did 350,000 kilometers in business class for Microsoft is not understating the point. So next slide, please. So here what we have is we've got what's going on in a certain area where we think it might actually be appropriate for you, or at least where most of the audience is with DDLS, around understanding where the Microsoft certifications fit. And when you're also thinking about certification, one of the things that Gary didn't touch on and Mary didn't touch on was one thing I've seen in a lot of people's career is the idea that a certification basically is a marker point or a milestone, or it's something that exists on your resume at a particular point in time. And when you're looking at your career, like when I look back at my career now, 25 or more years in the industry, I can look back at all of the progress markers that I have in terms of when I got particular certifications. Now, why this is important, so I've got a good mate that was working with me in that Faculty of Arts at University of Melbourne. And his career went great places and then it crashed. And now, because he didn't certify after that initial NT4 certification, he's having a lot of challenges simply getting past a recruiter screen for roles that he's eminently qualified for. And so he's doing first level service desk level stuff in his late 40s because he doesn't have that story across his career of the certifications he got every couple of years that just attested to stuff that I know he knows, but a recruiter doesn't know he knows. So to come into this, we've got a bunch of different certifications. And we talked, or Mary talked about this idea of, do you start at fundamentals? Now, fundamentals is very much, do you understand concepts? So do you understand the difference between infrastructure as a service or platform as a service? If that makes sense to you, then you probably don't need a fundamental certification. If that makes no sense to you whatsoever, that would be a good place to start. Then we have what I would think about for the general audience at DDLS is people that have been around 10, 15, 20 years in the industry. They know a bit about running a server. They know a bit about running a network. So where would they go? Well, the administrator associate might be the place. And that's basically, how do I do IT operations in the cloud? The idea that there's a whole lot of things that you've still got to manage: virtual machines, storage, networking, security, all of those things that you were doing on-prem, you might need, or you do need to know how to do in the cloud. This idea that you deploy in the cloud and you don't worry about it is absolute trash. And the administrator associate takes you across all of Azure and how you manage and understand and interact with and administrate all of the services within Azure. Then you've got areas like network engineer associate, and that's where you're starting to come down and look at, how do I manage networking in Azure? So you'll get a bit of a general of it at the administrator associate. And then when you start to see a specific technology called out at the associate level, what you're understanding is it's talking about, okay, this is actually talking about this particular subject domain area, and that the coverage might be a lot more rigorous at that area. Virtual desktop speciality, the whole idea behind that one is, how do you get people off remote desktop services on-prem, and how do you think about spinning up these things in the cloud? And remote desktop's a great concept for cloud computing, simply because if you are running remote desktops on-prem, you had to have all of that resource on-prem. And especially during the pandemic, most people did not have the capacity to host their entire workforce through remote desktop with their on-prem environment. Whereas if you were just spinning it up in someone else's data center, that was a lot easier. Then we've got things like DevOps engineer expert, and that is more, when you're seeing that expert, that's where you're really specializing into a certification. And it wouldn't be something that you would take unless you were very, very specifically skilled on those things. So we're starting off with fundamentals, which is, I don't know about this. Then you're moving into this associate, which is, I know about this and I'm starting to use some of it, not all of it, because a certification, you'll look at a certification and go, I don't use all of that, but I use some of it. And then you go to expert, which is actually, I've been working with this and I want to attest to my knowledge. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the ones I wanted to talk about here is I wanted to actually talk about the Windows Server Hybrid Admin. Now, why I like talking about that one is that's a certification that I designed. I came up with the certification, I came up with the structure of the certification, I came up with the objective domains and worked through it through the process where you actually have a whole lot of other people contribute. So it's not exactly all my wording, but it was my conception. And so what's the idea of that particular thing? Well, that's a certification for someone who has taken or has a good understanding of Windows Server and how to extend Windows Server into the cloud. Because what is increasingly apparent within Microsoft's messaging about Windows Server is that, yes, you can have it just on-prem, but a lot of people extend it into the cloud because Windows Server is designed to be made better by adding different cloud services. And a great example of this is Azure File Sync. If you've had an on-prem Windows Server, you've known we've had distributed file system for 20 years, which allows you to replicate a particular file share across multiple locations. Well, what Azure File Sync does is it has your back end in the cloud, and then you're replicating through the cloud. Now, why that's cool is that with distributed file system, you had no way of having it automatically do something with the files that no one was using anymore. So you'd have a file share that was sitting there for a couple of years, and it was absolutely gigabytes, maybe terabytes of stuff, the majority of which wasn't used. With Azure File Sync, there's an automatic process that says, you know what, all that stuff no one's using, we're going to keep it in the cloud. And if someone wants to use it, we'll pull it down from the cloud. But other than that, suddenly your file servers are only storing the stuff that needs to be there. Now, that's the Hybrid Admin Associate, and it's broken up into 2 exams. The first one dealing with core stuff. And the way that that certification works is it starts off with all of the stuff that you might need to know about a particular technology, like Active Directory on-prem, and then we move into Active Directory in hybrid, storage on-prem, storage in hybrid. All of that stuff that you would have needed to know for 2016, 2012, or 2008 certification in terms of those core on-prem technologies is there, but also the addition of the hybrid flavor. And then in the advanced services stuff, that's where you move from identity, storage, networking, and management into things like security, high availability, disaster recovery, and monitoring. And it could be one exam, except for it would have been a 6-hour exam, and people don't like that at all. So we broke it up into 2 exams that lead to that one certification. Now, in terms of things like the Azure Administrator, that's a 1 exam thing where you're taking 1 exam, I think it's 104, and then you come out with that particular certificate. And then there's other ones like going for your DevOps Engineer Expert, where you're actually building a bunch of exams together and you move those exams by combining them into an endpoint certification. And I'll stop now and we'll keep moving on, but I will be answering questions in the Q&A section.
Thank you so much, Orin. Unfortunately, I will not be able to give the same level of detail in the next slide. I do not have that much info in the design of the courses. However, what I'd like to point out is that we do have the courses or certification pathways that allow for 2 exams, then give you the associate. Some, like the previous slide, only needed 1 exam and then you got an associate certificate. But then with the expert, it's important to note here that sometimes you just need 1 prerequisite to be able to then move into another set of exams to then earn your expert certificate. So with this one, the main concept I want to talk about here is the difference between the types of certificates and how to get to them, and that you need to be mindful of the types of prerequisite that you might need to sit before you can move on to an expert. So for example, this one here, the Modern Desktop Administrator Associate, it's for a person who wants to be able to deploy, configure, secure, and manage and monitor devices and client apps. So if that's you, then you will need to sit 2 courses, each one of which have an exam that you must sit through. And then after that, you can earn that. But you can still brag on LinkedIn, as I did when I completed my fundamentals, if you just get the exam certificate, because I mean the exam badge. So you got the exam badge, you can still use, and you still have bragging rights to share that you've completed one exam, and then when you complete the other one, guess what? You get that certificate, which you can also use to brag on LinkedIn and whatever other platform that you want to. So with that, what do you do with all that information that we've just shared, and we've just told you how important it is to get your certificate? What should you be doing? Well, we want you to find that course that you're after. Find that course that's gonna differentiate you and give you the confidence that you need, and give you the validation that you might want at work. So find your course. We want you to select and book that course, attend your instructor-led training with DDLS. We'll be more than happy to take you through your journey, prep for your exam, and sit that exam and earn your qualification. And then you've got all the bragging rights that you can have to continue to brag on all your social medias and even at work and with your employers. So what recommendations and course offers do we have for you? So one thing we continue to do is we continue to innovate. We want to enable you to thrive in a digital landscape of tomorrow. This is why DDLS exists today. So what we do all the time is we go and think about how we can enable you. What can we do? Which offers can we put together to make it easier for you to pick up the courses that you need to complete the certification that you need? And at the moment, we've got quite a few. I'm not going to go and read each one of them, but we do have a lot of discounted bundles that are available that actually make up a certification pathway and complete it for you, and makes it easier for you to actually combine 2 courses at a much better price. And so you'll be able to see these offers when we complete the call, and then you'll receive an email with all of our offers that will help you decide what it is and which course that you should sit, and give you the discount to enable you to do so. So with that, I would like to open it up to questions. Please use this time as you like to post any questions, and Orin and Gary and I will do our best to answer any questions that you might have.
We've had a few happen, Mary, as people have been chatting, which I think we've probably answered as we've been going along. It might be worth, Mary, if you've got that slide that's just got sort of the roadmap on, which I think was a hidden slide after this, if you just put that up so people can have a little bit of a look at that. I don't know if people can come off mute and ask questions, but they're very welcome to type them into the Q&A panel if there's anything they'd like to ask.
And I'm happy to answer more questions, because there was one around the Windows Server stuff and the hybrid stuff, if people want some guidance or what's going on with that, because there's a lot of people that do have those traditional sort of on-prem certifications, or who might have other questions that they want answered, and I'm certainly happy to answer them.
And then there was silence.
Well, that makes it a lot easier. It's sort of like when you finish presenting somewhere in the world and you're waiting to see if anybody wants to come up to the bottom of the stage to ask you any questions, or if everybody's off to the next. So there was a question there: what's the fastest path to the MCT? You should be putting that in the Q&A. But with the MCT, I mean, obviously Gary employs them, but in terms of my own thing, it was simply that you had to be certified, and then you actually had to find a way to be either go and get a certificate saying that you were qualified as an instructor, or there used to be the ability to actually get a training facility to basically say, yeah, this person has demonstrated teaching skills. Now, in my case, I'd been lecturing at the University of Melbourne. So the fact that I'd lectured at the University of Melbourne and that I'd been certified for years made it fairly easy to get an MCT.
But that you just nailed it, really. You need a professional certification, so an associate or expert level. You then need to prove you can train, and you can do that with DDLS. We can actually validate that, fill in some forms, and you're on the way to being an MCT. And we'd love to have a conversation with you if that's a role that you want to pursue. Steve's actually asked what's our view on sort of YouTube sessions and walkthroughs. There's a plethora of ways to get trained. You know, we are a classroom-based and a digital-based learning business. We create digital content as well as classroom-based. If the YouTube sessions are going to work for you, happy days. My general view is, you know, if I'm getting on a plane, I want the guy to have had some proper training and not watched a few YouTube videos on how to land the thing. But you know, some of them are really good, particularly for short, sharp problems. I find them best.
I've got an answer to that. I used to be a trainer at DDLS while I'd also written the exam books for the exam. And so the question is, why on earth would I go and pay, you know, several $1,000s for training when I could go and buy your book for $100? And that's a good question. Here's the thing. When you are in a classroom with someone who's an expert on it, they can answer the questions that you have at that point in time. I might respond to your email as an author, or the person might respond to the YouTube thing on their thing. And there's some good YouTubers and there's a lot of terrible YouTubers. A lot of people who have summarized the material. An instructor who's taught a course before has had a lot of questions come to them. They've understood how to actually address the question that you've got, and they've provided an answer to what you want to know, rather than, you know, you trying to frame it in a sentence or two in the YouTube comments. So it's great if you are a passive learner, if you can take something that someone else has constructed, but most of the time you will have things that you've got questions about. You ask them. That's why you go to training, is that you aren't just sitting there imbibing from the instructor, but you are interacting with the instructor, and that's what the instructor is being paid for.
You also get to chat to people in the same situation as you, whether it's a virtual or even in a classroom session. There are people from other organizations with the same pain. I've always probably learned as much from other people in the room as I do from the content. So Orin, here's one that you may have more insight in than I've got. Jonathan asks, the certifications for things like C# etc. have pretty much disappeared, which we know. There's a lot of emphasis on PowerShell and Power Apps right now. What was the reasoning, do you know, for the C# retirement?
Well, I can't speak exactly to the reasoning, but what I know is that there is a move in certainly the developer space in terms of and you'll see this on Microsoft Learn itself, that when you take a Learn module, you can actually select which language you want to do it in. So it isn't the testings existing on it. It's like a role-based certification. It's not that the testings on a specific technology. It's instead on the role itself and how to provide a solution with that role. So my understanding is that a lot of the developer type certifications, instead of being specifically targeted around a particular language, are actually targeted around solving particular problems in whatever way that you're happy with on this particular platform. So I don't know what the answer to the project managers, certainly not necessarily in the Microsoft space, in that if you want to get familiar with particular products, you're probably best off actually engaging in a platform such as Microsoft Learn, which will give you introductions to. And that's one place where you start your learning. And again, when you're thinking about how you're going to approach your instructor-led training, it doesn't hurt to go into instructor-led training having done some pre-reading so that you actually have questions about the thing that you're going to be presented, so that you can actually start to drill down with the instructor on what you've actually got questions about, and to go in prepared, not to go in cold and say, I'm going to all learn it all, you know, from Monday morning onwards.
If that's Eva's question, something else, Eva, we've done around enabling project managers and even CEOs to get a heads up is to expose them to the fundamental series of courses and exams, if you want to do them, that Microsoft have. So, for example, AZ900, snappingly entitled Cloud Fundamentals, will give you the helicopter view, ideal for a project manager or a business leader who's not hands-on techie. Even includes stuff on licensing, which is the world's most boring subject, in my humble opinion, but just enough. And again, you can do the exam for that, and you can then claim to achieve your first Microsoft certification, displayed proudly with your Agile and your Prince 2 or whatever project management certifications you have.
Now, to get to Craig's question on server hybrid, at the moment, yes, they are listed in beta. However, I can't tell you the exact date, but I'm going to suggest that very shortly they will not be in beta. So I would wait, always wait. There was a beta period for those exams that ended on January 10th. And when you do a beta exam, you might have to wait a couple of weeks for your result. The moment that they go live, that is the moment they're the full versions of the exams, you get your result immediately. So I would wait a couple of weeks or maybe less. And then suddenly you'll be able to take those in alpha. But if you're thinking about doing them right now, well, I would go and do some study to begin with, to make sure that you're up to date. And I don't know what the state of the practice tests are around that, because I actually haven't looked at the moment. So there was a question about performance-based lab questions. For the most part, what you'll see on most exams is scenario questions, and you'll also, which is that you read a scenario and then you answer questions about the scenario or individual questions. There's not as many simulations in the exams at the moment, at least not any of the ones I've taken recently.
Yeah, they were taken out, I think, as the move towards self-proctored gathered paste with COVID, because not everybody had the capabilities to run them, and there was more issues than were solved, to be honest.
We have 4 minutes left. 3 minutes left. We can quickly show you 1 or 2 more slides for a recap, or if there's no more questions, we can let you go.
I think as 4 people jumped off the second you said that, 5 people.
And then, yes.
I think we've reached a natural conclusion. Personally, I'd like to thank all the presenters today. Mary, I know this is your first one. Brilliant, well played. Orin, the seasoned professional, thank you so much for volunteering and for your support and your wisdom and your kind words. And for everybody who attended, please do keep in touch. Feel free to find certainly me and Mary on LinkedIn. We'd love to keep in touch. Thank you for your questions, really insightful. And we look forward to welcoming you in the classroom in the very near future.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Orin. Thanks.
Some nice feedback there, Mary. So everybody's saying thank you. So congratulations on, I think, your first, this is your first official DDLS webinar, isn't it?
It is indeed. And couldn't have asked for a better panel.
Well, I think we can happily jump off.
I think so. Yes, the participants.
See you, Orin. Nice to see you, buddy.
See you later, guys.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your holiday, Gary.